Okay. Right. Okay. Let's start. So, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Videy, and I'm third year computer science student. And this will be a cases on learning and optimization in multi-agent systems. So few points before. This will be a fairly informal session. So, if you have any doubts, then feel free to like either just type it in the chat, or maybe you can interrupt me also. I'll be stopping in between to ask you guys if you have some doubts. But if you do not understand something, then feel free to interrupt me, like unmute yourself and interrupt me. Right. So, okay. So let's start. Firstly, I thought that I'll introduce some terminology that I'll be using throughout the talk. There will be some overlap, like unintentionally maybe, in the terminology. That is because of different backgrounds. So multi-agent system is a field, like it's a very broad field, and there have been lot of basically components in it, and each of them use different terminology. So there are some game theoretic terms. There are some terms that are specific to say reinforcement learning related things. So in short, I'll be using those terms. So the most important is agent or player. So agent or player is, like, you can assume it to be the learning algorithm. Like in machine learning, you have the algorithm, so the brain basically. So agent or player, either you can call it, agent is more machine learning term, player is more game theoretic term. Then is the environment. You have multiple agents in this scenario, and the environment is the world, like the surrounding or the game or the system, whatever you want to call. So it's everything apart from the agents. Then are the actions or decisions or moves. So basically, these are, like, in the game you have some moves, like in chess you have moves, or uh, suppose you have a robotic system, so those robots are taking some actions or decision in certain situations. So that means actions. Then there's this thing called strategy or policy. Policy is again, yeah, more machine learning type term, and strategy is more game theoretic term. Which Policy is basically like it has a notion of time. So at each and every state, I forgot to mention state here, but state is like the whatever information you have about the environment, you can assume that is a state. So what action should I take? So there'll be some sort of a function which should tell the agent what action to take. So that is policy or the strategy. Then there might be, in some cases, not in all cases in multi-agent systems, but in some cases where the players get some reward or some payoff of the because of the actions that they take. So that this you can assume it to be something like, um, suppose a robot is there and it is like doing the task of washing the dishes, and then it does that well. Then you give it some points basically. So you can assume it like that. On a game, you get some points. So it's like that. Then there's something called best response or greedy policy. That is like at that time step, what is the most greedy, what is the most exploitative step that you can take. So that's kind of the best response thing. And for the game, so basically, a multi-agent system can also be said as a multiplayer game. And broadly, there are two types of games. So one is a zero sum game, other is a general sum game. Zero sum is like a special category of games where basically, like, zero sum means that there is no net change in the system. So whatever the reward was received by some agent, the equal amount of that was deducted from some other agent. So the in total, the sum is zero. So basically, like, if I get plus one, you get minus one. So right, like that. And general sum is like, it need not be like I can get plus 10, you can get minus 5, or anything. The sum can be anything. Right. Okay, so that was some terminology. So, like, if at any point I use agent or player, so like they mean the same thing. That is what I wanted to just tell by this. Right. So multi-agent systems. So, like, it's very difficult to define multi-agent systems. Although, like, I have tried to define it in two lines, but this might not cover like every aspect of the definition. But broadly, it's like multiple autonomous entities. These can be artificial agents or humans or both, with computational abilities, interacting in an environment with distributed or decentralized information, with similar, conflicting, or mixed interests. So this has various components. So firstly, yeah, it's like the agent can be the environment can be populated by artificial as well as human agents, right? And like if you're wondering where does computational ability come inside humans, so just assume computation to be your brain, like whatever the firing of neurons is going on inside your body, that's a computation going on inside your body. And then they're interacting in an environment, and this is one of the most important things, that the information is distributed or decentralized, right? So suppose take a football match to be a multi-agent system. So there, for example, the goalkeeper does not know everything about what is going on the field, right? It just has it just has some particular view, right? Like to some horizon till which it can see, or it is able to like not able to see what's happening on the other side of the other half of the field. So basically, the information available to it is limited, right? So basically, the agents here are limited with respect to the information. They do not know everything about the environment. Although, like many times we violate this assumption, and violating this assumption many times, makes our problem very easy. But actually, it should be like ideally it should be decentralized. Then there is these interests. So basically, interests are like what you want. So basically, agents or humans, you can say, they can be cooperating at a situation, they can be competing in a game, or they can have mixed interests. So like you can have team games. Like in football game, those 11 players are cooperating with each other, but they're competing with the other 11 players of the other team. So this is sort of like a concise definition of multi-agent systems. There's a lot more things that I have not included, but this is like a overview. Then right. So basically, so in single agent system you have static system, right? And the agents are not, so if only one agent is learning, right? But here the all the agents are learning simultaneously. And so basically here the thing is that the environment is not static. The other agents are responding as one agent is learning, right? So this is where actually it differs from single agent systems. And what we try to do in multi-agent system is answer this simple, very, very simple, basic question, that what should each agent do in a multi-agent system, right? That is something that we want answer of. But the answer is not complex. That is why we are like talking about this. Otherwise, this cases would not have been there. Right. So I'll be like answering the I'll be answering this question. I'll try to answer this question in this talk. But here's like kind of some points I had listed on motivation, on why should we think about multi-agent systems in artificial intelligence, right? So like you see a lot of cool applications in machine learning, artificial intelligence, these like some like various applications in computer vision, like GPT-3 recently came in natural language processing, and so many advances. But like these are essentially single agent systems. So we are getting a lot of progress in such areas. So like why should we? What is the motivation that we should think about multi-agent systems? So like there are actually many, and I've listed a few of them. So one very simple and like the most intuitive explanation is psychology and evolution. So evolution, yeah. So basically, like humans, humans have evolved over millions of years, and humans have lived in societies and continue to live in. They interact, coordinate, collaborate, compete with each other, and that is how like the balance goes on. It was not like a one single some organism that evolved continuously and then just evolved fully, right? So there was always agency involved basically. And similarly psychology. So psychology, there is sort of psychology that if there are more number of people, they usually take better decisions. So yeah, one instance you can see is like when you form a government, right? So that's something like you trust that if there are a lot of people, then they mostly will take the correct decision. Right. So this is a sort of a psychological and philosophical motivation. Then going more into the machine learning component is where like basically when you have multiple agents, you can distribute the problems and distribute them into subcomponents, which might be easier to solve, and it provides some flexibility and also scalability to scale a system. It improves the robustness because you can have some potential threats like adversarial agents in a system. So you also need to work on the robustness of the agents. Then it sort of like enables some reusability of the constituents. Like you can reuse one type of agent for like for some other work. um, then they said this the agents should should take care of the agency of the other agents, right? So artificial agents, if we have to like if we talk about them, so if we go into real world, then multi-robot interaction coordination, human robot interaction coordination, so these things require agency. And this will also help to to account about the learning of the other agents and to develop some human like reasoning abilities, incorporate more explainability into the system, so making the systems more interpretable. And yeah, in the end, yeah, this is a theory of mind which is like very exciting field, where basically any so an agent should know what the other agent is doing without explicitly the other agent telling it. So an example of it is suppose you are like crossing a road and you see someone, a pedestrian, waving his or her hand towards a car. So even though you don't like that person has not told you explicitly, you know that that's kind of he or she is calling a taxi or something like that. So basically you perform deductions, and that is what is theory of mind in psychology. And something similar is in artificial intelligence. So that is something which is we are nowhere near to it currently in terms of the progress in AI right now. But that's sort of like a long-term goal. Right. So this actually this talk won't be based much on reinforcement learning, but this sort of I wanted to just like give a flavor of what all components will be there. So this is a very nice small paragraph which again has a lot of things which are there in the multi-agent system settings. So basically, we have a large number of distributed agents, as I said, which need to be able to make independent decisions. So here, the word independent is important because if we have a centralized framework, then it will be very difficult to scale up. That's why we need to have independent decision makers. And based on some local observations, again, distributed information, in order to contribute most effectively to an overall goal to maximize individual rewards, taking into account the presence of other agents in the environment. That is the most important thing, and that is how you'll make your agents more intelligent, right? And yeah, so in terms of biology, yeah, again, evolution has best answered such questions, and now we need to think how can we incorporate these notions in our artificial agents to make them more intelligent, right? So yeah, some of the challenges. So I don't think that there should be any doubts as of now. This was like a motivation only. So if there are there any doubts? Okay, I'll move on. Right. So there are some now. So okay. So there it should be a difficult problem. That is why we are talking about it, right? So now, what are the challenges that we face? So all the challenges, all the problems associated with single agent ones that are there that you see in normal machine learning. Apart from that, there are a bunch of other challenges like multi-agent collaboration, multi-agent communication. So collaboration is where collaboration again comes with something called negotiation, where the agents need to collaborate and simultaneously they need to negotiate also like humans do. Then there is multi-agent communication. So in humans, the communication is through language. In machines, you can assume communication through bits. So like that. Then something called credit assignment, where if there is a group and that's cooperating to do a task, then suppose that group gets some reward, so some payoff for that task. Then so how do you then sort of decide what exactly each of the how much each of the agent contributed actually? So how do you decide that? That is multi-agent credit assignment. Then the big one is non-stationarity, which is that the environment seen by one agent is continuously changing. Why? Because the other agents are also simultaneously learning. They're also progressing. Their parameters are changing basically. Then reciprocity, then decentralized execution, partial observability. This is one important thing, that the environment. So environment might not be known. So it might be like a robot is dropped into some environment, and it does not know anything about the environment, and it needs to figure out what to do. So that's basically like, or it might be that only some limited amount of information is available to that robot. So that's partial observability. Then there can be presence of some adversarial agents in the environment, and it can be very difficult to spot which agent is adversarial. They can seem very similar to ordinary agents, but they can have very adverse effects. Then yeah, scalability. What if you have 1,000 agents? That will be very difficult. Then there's something called social dilemmas. I won't go deep into it, but it's like you avoid falling into social dilemmas. So yeah, there are bunch of problems associated, and yeah, in this talk, I'll try to convince you that what you might be thinking of a correct, what you think of, okay, this would be the correct notion of optimization. That is not the case. There's something different that we should do in multi-agent systems to actually like get this sort of handle this non-stationarity and handle this notion that an agent should reason about the learning of other agents. So there's something different that we need to do, and that is what we will talk about. And for simplicity, I'll be considering two agents in this talk, but the idea is like very general and it can be extended to any agent. Right. So, okay. So for those of you who do not know about Nash equilibrium, it's like a okay. So basically, it's a term from game theory, and the thing is that in single agent case, you have a clear notion of what you need to do. So if you have a machine learning problem, you have the objective to minimize the loss function, or maximize something, or maximize reward. So you have the clear idea of what you need to do. But when you have multiple agents, if all the agents are cooperating, then it's fine. But if you have some mixed case, what you need to do, it's very unclear. So often, this is something which is desired in many situations. Like I'm saying many, not all. I'll clear why not all. So what it means is that if there are n agents in Nash equilibrium, then it means that none of the agents has any incentive to unilaterally change its strategy or policy, with the strategies or policies of all the other n agents remaining the same. So this is sort of like like something that, given that all the other agents are staying constant, all the other agents are not changing their strategy, any of the nth agent should not have any incentive to change its strategy. So everyone should be happy on what they have. There should be no incentive to go to like to switch to other strategies. And another thing is that any finite game has at least one Nash equilibrium. This is like a property in game theory, which like that a finite game means a game with finite number of players and finite number of actions, finite number of decisions. So that at least will have one Nash equilibrium. Always that is true. And some of the like toy examples are, so these are matrix game, like matching pennies. So basically here you like flip a coin and it has heads or tails. So these are two agents. So basically this is agent one, this is agent two, and agent one can take two actions, either heads or tails. Same for agent two. And the game is that if both the coins are same, so if both the coins have the same outcome, then agent one gets a reward of +1 and agent two gets -1. On the other hand, if the outcomes of the coins are different, agent one gets -1. So this is a small game. This also note that this is a zero sum game because the net reward is always zero at each entry, you can see. So like, can anyone guess what would be the Nash equilibrium in this? Firstly, like, did everyone get what is Nash equilibrium, or should I explain it again? Okay, so I'm not sure. So see here Nash equilibrium. So here basically here you will not see any pure strategy Nash equilibrium. So here basically if you see at this state, you see at this state, agent, this is agent one and agent two. agent one is incentivized to change its strategy. So suppose agent two is like it is constant on heads only. Agent one will try to move to one will try to move to the other outcome, which is heads, so that it gets plus one and the other agent gets minus one, right? So basically, this would not be a Nash equilibrium. Similarly, all these won't be a Nash equilibrium, and hence in this game there does not exist a pure strategy Nash equilibrium, but there exists a mixed strategy Nash equilibrium, which is to like play each move with probability of 0.5. So basically, be as random as possible. That is how you will achieve equilibrium in this situation. Similarly, is in this situation, this is like the classic game of rock paper scissors. Here also, like the agents have to you play each move with probability 1/3. So if there will be infinite number of moves, the probability of each of the actions will asymptotically converge to 1/3, and that is what will be the Nash equilibrium here. And this is third matrix scheme that I wanted to show, where, like as I said, Nash equilibrium is desirable in many situations, but not in all. So one of the situations is this, where you see this is something called prisoner's dilemma, where the payoff matrix is like this. This -2 -1 is the payoff or the reward that the agents get. So one action is C and other action is D. C stands for cooperate, D stands for defect. So here you see, like, if you will analyze, then this move where both the agents defect is actually the Nash equilibrium, but this is not desired because it results in an average reward per agent, a per agent average reward of -2. On the other hand, like the agents can do better if they both cooperate and get reward of -1 each. Right, so basically here socially optimal equilibrium is required instead of the Nash equilibrium. So there can be some situations where you like the socially optimal equilibrium is other than Nash. Here both of them are the same, but here they are different. Right, and this is something that we will be using a lot. So I think most of you would be knowing about it. Taylor series that we'll be using it a lot in future. Is there any question?
Yeah, I had a question. So in the rock, paper, scissors example that you gave,
right?
So aren't rock, and paper, scissors, are those not equilibria?
What?
The rock, the 0-0 case, basically, along the diagonal, where you have 0-0.
This one.
Yeah, so are those not considered as Nash equilibria? Like, because...
Right. So suppose you take this situation, and this is agent one and agent two. This agent is, suppose you assume that it will always choose rock only. So now this agent will have an incentive to move to paper so that it gets +1 and the other agent gets -1.
Okay.
Yeah. So basically, no agent should have any incentive. So suppose I'll show you an example. So see this, where both of the agents are defecting. So see agent one. Suppose agent one is deterministically sticking on defecting. Okay. Now you have to see whether agent two will switch to cooperation or not. If agent two will switch to cooperation, it will get a reward of -3. Whereas when it was defecting, it was getting a reward of -2. So it won't do that, right? So basically, the irrespective of the other agent, it won't change the strategy, and same will hold for agent two. So this case is, so in this game we have a pure strategy Nash equilibrium. Are you getting it?
Yeah, understood. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and yeah, guys. So like, if you have any doubts, then feel free to like interrupt me in between and ask questions. Like, I want it to be an interactive and informal session. Right. So okay. Now here comes the interesting part. So gradient descent, right? So this is something that all of us like very much know, and like this is something that we use almost in every machine learning that we use. Like, apart from something like decision trees, etc. When you go to some optimizing some functions, like suppose if you use some deep learning stuff, then you this is a by default method. Or if you don't use stochastic gradient descent, you use some sort of modifications like Adam and all, but that are just the modifications of gradient descent only. In the end, it is just following the steepest direction of the gradient, right? So That is what you do in single agent systems. Now, okay, one simple method would be to use the same for two agents. Okay, then that is called something called simultaneous gradient descent, where simultaneous means that x and y. So x and y are the players. X and y actually are the parameter vectors of the players. I'm calling them players just to make everything simple. Simultaneous gradient descent corresponds to where both of the agents do simple gradient descent on their objective function, right? So this is the equation that you would be familiar with. This is the learning rate, and you're solving the problem in min of x. This is in single agent system. For two agent system, you have agent one solving min with respect to x of f of x comma y, and agent two is solving min y g of x comma y. Note that important thing is that the objective function is dependent on both of the parameters, right? So basically, if you have n agents, it will be dependent on the since it is so okay. Why have I conditioned on x and y? Because the outcome of an environment depends on the action of all the agents, right? So the objective of each of the agents that should be conditioned on all the actions of all the agents, and actions are determined by some strategy or policy that is in turn parameterized by some function, right? Sorry, parameterized by some neural network, right? Or whatever you want to take. So the parameters would be x and y. So that is why I have conditioned them on x as well as y. So suppose there are n agents, so you will condition them on say x1, x2, x3, xn, right? Like that. And this is what you can do, like naively. What you can do, you can just follow gradient descent on both of the. So this is just the gradient of x, and this is the gradient of f with respect to x, and this is the gradient of g with respect to y. And this is like, for those of you who are familiar a bit with reinforcement learning, this is something called independent reinforcement learning, where f will just be replaced by the policy gradient. This gradient will be replaced by a policy gradient. Like this was for just the people who were familiar with RL, and no need to worry about that otherwise. All right. So if it is very simple, so what is the problem in this? So as I said, like this seems to be an intuitive generalization of single player games to multiplayer games. But actually it is not, and I'll clear why. So if I'm saying that it is not, so what is the motivation to go beyond SimGD? In short, I'll be calling simultaneous gradient descent as SimGD, right? So if you take even the most simplest cases like bilinear game, so this is this game called bilinear game, where agent one or player one tends to maximize xy, and agent two tends to minimize that. So it's a zero-sum game. And if you see this game xy, then the Nash of this game is 0, 0, and this is unique Nash. Is everyone getting why the Nash equilibrium is 0, 0? If anyone has doubt why 0, 0 is the desirable point, then just I'll explain that. Right. So okay, I'll explain anyway. So basically, it's that suppose agent two is fixed on its strategy of y equal to 0. So even if like irrespective of what x will be, the objective xy will remain 0, right? So it won't have any incentive to change. So similarly for agent one. So that is why the Nash equilibrium is 0, 0. And so this graph actually shows. So this basically I had it's an experiment where. Basically we use this simultaneous gradient descent, this thing, to optimize these two functions. So basically what we do is instead of f, just plug in xy, and instead of f, just plug in minus xy, and instead of g, just plug in plus xy. Okay. And perform gradient descent. And what you will observe is that instead of converging to 0, 0, it actually diverges, and it goes and goes on diverging and diverges to infinity. And you can also see this here. Like this is actually a better graph for divergence, and this is with learning rate 0.05. So learning rate is this eta that you see here. Instead of converging to 0, 0, it oscillates and just goes. It blows up basically. It blows to infinity. And since this is a zero-sum game, this has another name called gradient descent ascent, or GDA, if you want to call that. And so basically, by this example, I want to show that even for some very simple cases like this bilinear game, like this simple method, which to all of us would seem that this is the natural generalization, or this is the most intuitive generalization, is failing actually. And analogous to like this, if you want to sort of get a intuitive explanation of what is happening here, so for that I have this rock paper scissor illustration. So like this is a bit of motivation in game theory that I'll give, that suppose like basically what is happening here, each agent is running after the other agent without actually interacting. So basically it's like suppose agent 1 played scissor, agent 2 played rock, sorry, agent 2 played paper, and with this agent 1 won and agent 2 lost, right? In the next move, agent 1, since it had won the last game, it did not change its strategy, but agent 2, since it lost the last game, with respect to what was the strategy of agent 1 previously, it changed its strategy. So it will change its strategy, supposed to paper, sorry, supposed to rock. So in the next game, agent 1 will win and agent 2 will lose. Then this recursively, this process will be happening, and then this will change the strategy to paper, and then this will change the strategy to scissors, and this will go on and go on and on, and it will form an infinite loop, right? So basically here what is happening is each of the players is choosing the strategy with respect to the last move of the other player, and using this is going on and on and on. And similarly, that is exactly what is happening here. That is why they are not converging to 0,0. The players are actually chasing each other instead of interacting. So there is no notion of interaction between players. If they would have been, they would be converging to 0,0. So this is sort of a simple motivation why this simultaneous gradient descent is not the correct thing to do. And similarly, so everyone, I think, at least would have heard of something called generative adversarial network, or GAN. So GAN is basically like something for generating images, although it has a lot of other things, but as of now you can assume it like that. And it is basically a 2-player competitive game between a generator and a discriminator. And basically it's very difficult to train GANs. There has been a lot of difficulties, and people have introduced various type of regularization, etc., for that. But this is like what I feel, that the core reason behind why the GANs do not work very well, it is why is it very difficult to optimize them, might be because that we are using the incorrect optimization procedure. If this optimization procedure is failing in such simple situations, it will obviously, not obviously, but more chances are that it will fail in such complex situations. Right. So here, okay. So this is something which is like for the people who want to see some illustration in some robotic stuff or some exciting stuff. So so here I actually presented a motivation in very mathematical and simple setting. But here I show that the same thing is true even if you go to very complicated and real world type. Although like this is not real world, this is simulated setting. But this is like a higher level setting. Even if you go there, you will find the same problem. So I won't go deep into what it is. I'll just show this. So this was a very nice work done by OpenAI, where they had these 2-player zero-sum games, and they were able to achieve very complex behaviors in such environments. So there were multiple environments like this sumo wrestling environment. So various behaviors like tackling, blocking, running, fooling the opponents, kicking, etc. So this is some penalty shootout environment, and they were able to achieve very nice type of behaviors that you would not expect in artificial agents. These policies that they obtained were like the state-of-the-art policies back then when this paper came out in 2018. Yeah, as you can see that the behavior is like moving in response to opponents. So this is something intelligent that the agents have learned. So why am I spotting this is because there was a follow-up work done on this, something called adversarial policies. Some of you might be familiar with this work. So basically what these people showed, this paper in 2020, what they showed is that those policies which I just showed you, which were playing like football very well and blah blah blah, those policies are actually very easy to attack. And I'll give you an illustration of how easy they are. So this is a paper website, and on the left you can see the normal video that I just showed you, and on the right you see something weird happening. Here you see this goalkeeper that you see is not doing anything as such, right? It's just laying on the ground and doing some weird stuff that you don't know what it is, but still you see most of the games the opponent is winning. Similarly, you see in this game where the objective is to cross the line. This is the normal case, and this is the adversarial case. So here you again see the opponent is winning a lot of times. Why this is happening in this video? It seems very like arbitrary that this is not doing anything. This is not even trying to block. At least the normal one is trying to block. So this is something called adversarial attacks, on which I'll not go deep. But why I have listed this paper is because I like this paper showed that such awesome policies that you saw that which work very well, which had these sort of complex behaviors emerging, they even can fail and fail very very badly. Even the failure percentage was more than 80%, and the time required for this adversarial training procedure was less than 3% of the time steps required for the actual training of policies. So like even I can just now train a policy in 24 hours on my like simple i5 or i7 processor, and I can do that. So it's very simple. And why is it happening? So why did I take this example? Because again here we revisit the problem that was caused by SimGD or that simultaneous gradient descent. Here again, the authors show that there's some sort of cyclic relationship that is there between the policies. So basically, in the paper, in the original paper, self-play was used to approximate the Nash equilibrium. Self-play is a strategy like where an agent plays against a copy of itself. So that was used to approximate the Nash equilibrium. But still, the optimization procedure used in that was simple gradient descent. There was some sophisticated algorithm like proximal policy optimization stuff, but the optimization procedure was simple gradient descent. And we know that that does not perform well. And even the authors noticed this sort of cyclic relationship, which is highly surprising in such a situation because these environments are transitive. Transitive means suppose football. So like an amateur player can be easily, so a professional player can easily beat an amateur player, right? So basically here what is happening? A beats C, and C beats C, yet C beats A. So here the cycle is forming. In a transitive game, if A is beating C and B is beating C, then A should be able to beat C. But here it is not happening. C in turn beats A. So again, a cyclic relationship is forming, and the whole reason, which in my opinion, this is actually my personal opinion, not in the paper, is that the optimization procedure used here ignores non-stationarity, which basically like you're ignoring basically that you're in a multi-agent system. So that is why you're failing, right? That is why everything is failing. Right. So does anyone have any doubts? Okay. Right. So so let's see now what is the problem. So where are we doing wrong? What is the problem actually? So okay, let's see what gradient descent is actually doing. So like as I said, we'll be using a bit of Taylor series. So so basically, what gradient descent is actually what gradient descent is, you're more familiar with that update rule where you have that x minus eta, x minus the learning rate into gradient, right? But actually, gradient descent is a local linearization of the game with quadratic penalty or regularization term. So don't get afraid by this some terminology. Basically, what I mean is that is it working? Yeah. So basically, if you have a function like this, so when doing gradient descent, you basically you approximate this by a tangent. I'm not able to draw it. Just assume that this is a tangent, and you form a local approximation of the game, right? So you approximate the function with locally, and how you approximate that is by taking the Taylor polynomial up to first order. So basically it is f plus the gradient of f with respect to x transpose into delta x, where delta x is small. Delta x is the like the change in x that you are going through. So that is how you linearly approximate it, right? But then so this is exactly what is here. So this is delta x, and this is the gradient term. This gradient is by the way constant, because this is evaluated at a point. So basically, I have not shown here, but this gradient is evaluated at xk comma yk. That is implicit. I have not shown it here. So this is the local linearization. And since we know that this is an approximation, so this approximation is not correct. So we have to impose a penalty. The penalty will be to express the limit in the confidence of the approximation, right? So there'll be some uncertainty. Like if you go very, very far away, so at this particular point, so at this particular point, suppose this is the x-axis, this is the y-axis. At this particular point, your approximation does not hold true, because approximation tells the value of y as about here, but actually it is this. So there is a large uncertainty, right? So to account for that uncertainty, we impose a penalty. And right now, since we are talking about Euclidean geometry, basically like Euclidean geometry basically means like where you use Euclidean distance, right? So basically the distance x minus xk is or square is basically you have that under root and x minus xk whole square, stuff like that. So we are doing it in Euclidean space. So the approximation, the penalty that you have will be x minus xk, or wait, instead of x minus xk, I'll write delta x. Delta x squared divided by 2 into eta. Eta is your learning rate. You add this term. This term is added to account for the uncertainty. And you, while doing gradient descent, you actually try to minimize this term. And if you see this carefully, if you differentiate this with respect to x, so this will go, because this is constant, because this is evaluated at the point xk yk. This is constant, so this will come out, and then this is x minus xk. So gradient of this, so derivative of this with respect to x will be 1. So you will have gradient of f. So we'll have gradient of f plus the derivative of this with respect to x. It's just x minus xk by eta, right? Because 2 will come here and this will get differentiated. So this is this is delta x by eta. And why did we differentiate? To make it 0, because this is argmin. So like the derivative will like if you are minimizing something, the derivative of that will be 0, right? So you made the derivative equal to 0. And if you like transpose this here, and if you then you this become if you this like transpose it there, then just you will get delta x is equal to minus eta into your gradient, which is exactly what gradient descent does, right? So this is a like a the gradient descent in form of Taylor series. You can also, like, this type of things will also come when you write the Lagrangian, but don't go into that. So yeah, why did I want to introduce this? Because now this helps us, this gives us some criteria how we can look at two agents, right? So if the gradient descent for when you have one player or when you have only one variable, if it is given by a local linearization of the game with a quadratic penalty, so the gradient descent for two players should be the local first order approximation of the full problem. Full problem means the problem including agent 1 and agent 2 both, with quadratic penalty terms or quadratic regularization or penalty terms on each player that expresses their uncertainty in the approximation. This is expressing that the approximation is not correct beyond the limit, right? So the second part is fairly easy. The quadratic penalty will be fairly easy because that is for each of the agent. But how do you approximate the problem fully? How do you locally approximate the problem? For single agent, it was very easy that you had this curve and then you had this tangent and you just locally approximated the function. But how do you do when you have two variables? Two variables basically mean two players. So there'll be some notion of how to linearize a game, right? Here you linearize the game with only one agent. Now you're linearizing the game with two agents or n agents. Right now I'm taking two agents. Now, one simple thing to do would be to consider that what if each agent linearizes its own objective function, right? So one approximation would be to use the linear term for both the agents. So this much you had before also. You add this also. So this is basically the linearization of second agent two, which is y here. The linear approximation of that. So like you had this gradient of f multiplied by delta x, then you can have gradient of g with respect to y into delta y. And similarly for in the second equation, you can similarly have the linearization for agent one. But this is actually like this does not give anything new to us because see this is constant because this is evaluated at the point and this is dependent on y and this is argument with respect to x. So this is basically independent of how x changes. So like having this or not having this does not like make a difference because this is just a constant, right? So we can remove this here. Similarly, in the second equation, we can remove and we again get this, which was nothing but simple gradient descent only, right? So we are back from where we started. Again, we don't have any interaction between the agents. So is everyone getting why this linearizing like this would be flawed? Why would it be incorrect to linearize like this? Is everyone getting that? Right. Okay. Okay. So here comes the interesting part. So instead of a linear approximation of the game, what if we consider a bilinear approximation? So what I mean by bilinear is linear with respect to each player, right? So basically it has x also and y also, but the degree of x, the maximum power of x is 1, right? And same for y. So what if we consider the bilinear approximation of the game? So what if we generalize to a multilinear, in this case it is bilinear approximation of the whole game with quadratic regularization for each agent, right? So whatever you had it, you write it as it is, and you add these two terms to each of the equation. You add these two terms in the red box, and what they are is I'll just explain what they are. Like it is looking very like it might be looking very dreadful, but it is actually very simple thing. So in the Taylor series, the second order approximation. So till now you considered the first order approximation, right? This is the first order approximation of a function. Then you can have like higher order terms also. So if you will approximate it to higher order, then you will get something like plus. Wait, I'll draw here only. So in addition to that linear term, you will get plus delta x transpose x f into delta x by 2 factorial, right? That is what you get when you do Taylor series approximation. So you have the Hessian. Hessian is basically the derivative of the derivative. So derivative is a vector. So a derivative of the gradient is a vector. So gradient of a vector is a matrix. So this is the Hessian, and this is what is the second order term for Taylor series. And this is exactly what is the what you call the linear approximation. This you will call the quadratic approximation. But instead of taking the quadratic approximation, I'm taking something which is in between linear and quadratic. Basically bilinear. Bilinear means that here instead of delta, so we'll have two variables, but both the variables the degree will be 1. So instead of xx, what we'll have is delta y transpose y x of f into delta x divided by 2, right? So this is exactly what I have written here. This is delta x transpose. This something called this d2xy is nothing but this is the gradient. So first what this means is we take the gradient of f with respect to y, then we take the gradient of that with respect to x again, right? So this is a mixed Hessian. Why I'm calling mixed? Because this has the derivative with respect to x also and with respect to y also, and then you multiply that with delta y, and same you do this for y, but here the x and y are inverted. So basically here you had x and then here you have y. So this is the bilinear approximation basically. So if you included this term, then that would have been quadratic approximation, because that would be in there the degree of x and y would be 2, because you multiply x, the delta x and delta x. So the degree would be 2, but here the degree still remains 1. But this is somewhat between linear and quadratic. That is why it is like bilinear approximation. And again, so from this step to this step, again, these two terms do not matter, because this is independent of x, this is independent of y. So this is what you get if you add these two terms. And what I'm saying currently, just believe me, that bilinear approximation is the lowest order approximation that captures interaction between players. Why does this capture interaction? I'll just tell in a while. And you can assume this to be between first order, second order, something like 1.5 order, although like that does not exist, but you can assume it to be. And here we use mixed Hessian. So this, if you have d2 x and x, that would be the pure Hessian. If you have x as well as y, that is something called mixed Hessian. And these mixed Hessian actually capture the magnitude of interaction between the players. By magnitude of interaction, I mean the effect of one agent on the other. So basically, as you saw here in the bilinear game, an agent was not accounting for the effect of other agent, right? It was just following its own myopic steepest gradient. But here, the story is different. You have some sort of explanation of how what x will do when y will change. So what this tells you is that when y is changing, how is x reacting? And then this will tell that when x is changing, how is y reacting? So this is actually the beauty of these bilinear terms. And this, what I was telling you guys, is actually something called competitive gradient descent in literature, which is like the core of this, like the core thing that I'll be introducing right now. This is already proposed in a paper which appeared last to last year. And I'll try to convince you that the natural generalization of gradient descent to multiplayer game is not SimGD. That you have seen, it is not SimGD, but it is actually something called CGD, which is competitive gradient descent. And I'll tell you in a while that why is it the natural generalization. So this is a screenshot that I've taken from the paper. Okay, firstly, does anyone have any doubt in this bilinear term, this bilinear approximation? Because yeah, this is actually very important. So if you have any doubt, then make sure that it is cleared. Otherwise, you won't understand the future slides.
I kind of missed one of the parts.
Yeah.
So I just want to know, like, what is the need for the quadratic to bilinear over there, and how did the justification work?
Quadratic, what, sir?
Like, you had quadratic we were considering. So why did we resort to bilinear?
Okay, so bilinear, quadratic, actually, I'll tell in a while why we are not taking quadratic approximation. Eventually, it will turn out that actually that I had in the last slides, why we are taking bilinear, why are we not taking quadratic or biquadratic. Is it fine if will it be fine if I like just hold that?
Yeah, sure. And like, how does it compensate? Like, is it similar bilinear to that? Like, what's the difference here? How is this compensating for that term? I'm saying.
Compensating for which term?
For the quadratic. Like, you're saying that it's a compensation, right? Consideration of bilinear instead of quadratic.
No. It's not a compensation. No. It's not a compensation. See, basically, one thing is that when we are talking about single agent optimization, our tendency to go to higher orders is like, suppose so our tendency is to go from linear to quadratic, quadratic to cubic, cubic to so on and so forth, right?
Right.
So yeah, if you have first order, you have gradient descent. Second order, you have Newton methods and all. But like what I'll in the end slides, what I have is that when you have multiple agents, like in this case, when you have two agents, it actually does not make sense to go directly from linear to quadratic. It actually makes more sense to go from linear to quadratic, linear to bilinear, because that is with respect to one agent. So here you see it is this term is not a pure term. It is first order in each of the agent, right? So when you have multiple agents, it makes sense to go from linear, then to bilinear, then to biquadratic, and so on.
Okay, fine. So if there are n agents, you would have this term like n terms for each equation.
Correct.
But that would be cumbersome, right?
Yeah, very cumbersome. So basically, if you have, suppose, 3 agents, assume that you have 3 agents. So you have x, y, and z. Z is a parameter of the third agent. So here, then you'll have one extra term, which will be delta x transpose d2 x z f x y z delta z. Getting it?
So then you'll have to differentiate x, y, x, z, and y, z.
Yeah. So correct. So basically, if there are more number of agents, then it will be a bit difficult. That is something on which something on which I'm currently working in my research to scale this to n agents. But right now I'll be talking about 2 agents, and in the end we can discuss a bit about extending this to n agents. One other interesting thing that I can tell you is that when you have a large number of agents, right? So at every instant, you need not consider interaction between all the agents. That is something like a mean field idea, where you approximate n-1 agents with a single agent, or n-1 agents with a small group of agents. So you sort of nullify the effect.
Okay, like a grouping of the agents.
Grouping
based
of
on the characteristics.
Correct.
Cool.
But if you have something like 4 agents, 5 agents, still it will be computationally tractable. So, but still, if you go with the proper theoretical method, you will get one extra term for each of the agents. So suppose there are 2 more agents, something like Z, you have Z as well as W. So here you will have d2xy, d2xz, and d2xw.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
Good.
Okay. All right. So okay, I'll continue now. So this is a screenshot I've taken from the paper, where basically this tells that this is in form of an update rule, and they tell that x comma y is the Nash equilibrium of this game. So this game is nothing but, like, I've written this as this. So basically here they have this x comma y is delta x delta y only. So if you transpose this here, x becomes xk plus 1 minus xk. So this becomes delta x. So this x is actually x minus xk, right? So this is a bi-level optimization problem that you have, and there's this theorem in the paper which they have proved that among all the possible randomized strategies with finite first moment, the only Nash equilibrium of the game, where the game is this one, is given by this. This looks very complicated, and it has some inverses also. But this this is very simple. Like I'll just derive it in 1 or 2 minutes. You need not worry about how these inverse came, and right now you didn't have anything, and it will come. Like eventually I'll explain it. And I won't go into the detailed proof, but sort of to give you guys an intuition, I have a small intuitive proof that you can have why this is happening. Why? So there are 2 things to prove. One is that why is this the only Nash equilibrium? Why do we have a unique Nash equilibrium? Oh, and one important point. Here I'm talking about local Nash equilibrium, not global Nash equilibrium. So if you have a non-convex function which has more than one local minima, right? So in that cases, if you have a non-convex function, I think I misspelled it. So if you have a convex function, then you will have only one global minima, right? But if you have a non-convex function, then you can have multiple. So here I'm talking about a local Nash equilibrium, because what you did here is you locally approximated it, right? So the Nash equilibrium that we'll get will be a local Nash equilibrium, will be true only in the local surroundings. But that also is actually a very big thing that we can achieve, because the normal gradient descent even does not guarantee us that. But this method can guarantee us that, and in a while I'll tell why this method actually is why this method is important, and I'll give a game theoretic interpretation of this method. Right. So now the proof is that suppose x and y be some random strategies, right? So you have some random strategies x and y are changing. So what you need to prove is that only there is only one Nash equilibrium. That is how you will convert this equation into update rules. if the point you get is unique, right? So you take an expectation of this thing. So I'm guessing that you might be familiar a bit with expectation. Expectation is basically like if you have a distribution, you sample from it, and then you multiply the sample value from the probability of sampling that value, and you sum it for all the variables sampled. That is something called expectation. So you take the expectation of it. This obviously is constant. So it does not, like, expectation has no effect on it. So because x and y are some random strategies we are assuming. So 1 second, we have the expected value of whole of this, and then we add and subtract this term, this term. So I'll just go to the whiteboard. So I want you to look at just this term, x transpose x. So at this point we have expected value of x transpose x, right? And then what I did is I added and subtracted this term. So you just add expectation of x squared. Sorry, wait. Sorry, it was actually square outside, and you subtracted this term, right? Now, why I did this is because this thing is actually something very interesting, which is this. So basically this thing, expectation of x squared minus the square of expectation of x, which is same as that we have here. So x transpose x is basically x squared. You can say that. This is actually equal to the variance of x, like the mean and variance that you have in statistics. So expected value means the mean, and this is how you get the variance. This is a small proof of it. And so what you can do is you can replace this whole thing with variance of x, right? And then you will have this thing, and this thing can be written as expectation of x transpose expectation of x, because x is a, like, this expectation of x is a vector, right? So you're multiplying two vectors, and that means you're taking transpose v transpose dot v, right? So yeah, so here basically here exactly you have this variance term, the same that we had here, this variance term. And the second thing you have is this expectation of x transpose expectation of x. Yes, you see expectation of x transpose expectation of x. You have this. Now, why did we do this? Because this gave us this variance term, and we have this that the objective value for both the players can always be improved by decreasing the variance while keeping the expectation the same. So you have this minimization problem, right? So you want to minimize this whole term. So what you can do is you can keep the expectation same, and still you can decrease the variance term, right? And if you go on decreasing the variance term, and finally, like, if it will converge to 0, so it will mean that the optimal value will always and only be achieved by deterministic strategy, because if you are keeping the expectations constant, then only other criteria is to keep the variance decreasing and decreasing. And at that time, the optimal value of this term, so optimal value is when this thing is minimized, like this thing is like you minimize it as much as possible. The optimal value there would be when we converge to a deterministic strategy where there will be no variance. So variance means basically measures how much deviation is there. If you have no deviation, you have converged to a deterministic strategy. So the objective function for both players can be improved by decreasing the variance, correct? While keeping the expectation the same, meaning that the optimal value will always be achieved by a deterministic strategy. So in the end, if you have a deterministic strategy, so if you have basically only one sample from a distribution, and you always have that, so you can replace this just with x, normal x, where x means you have a deterministic strategy. So what we do is we replace this expectation of x with small x, expectation of y with small y. We set the derivative of this, the upper equation with respect to x as 0. Then expectation of this y with this equation with respect to y as 0, and then we solve it. And I have created this which will, like, sort of help you. Yeah. So Yeah, here you had this term. So these two equations, I have so not equation, expressions. I've written them as it is, and then instead of expectation of x, since it's a deterministic strategy, I replaced it with x, and then I just made the derivative of this with respect to x as 0, and derivative of y, the derivative of this with respect to y as 0. So this is exactly keeping setting the derivative to 0, and you can shift the terms a bit, and you'll get x is equal to this thing and y equal to this thing, and you substitute x from this equation, you substitute x to this equation, and then you'll exactly get this thing where you will have inverse of this thing multiplied by this thing, right? So if you see carefully, this is a matrix, this is again a matrix, so, and this is identity matrix, so this is in total this is a matrix, and then this is the inverse of a matrix, then this is a vector, and then this is a product of a matrix and a vector, hence this is a vector. So in total this is a product between a matrix and a vector, correct? And there are some assumptions when these matrix inverse would exist. If you have a zero sum game, then always the inverse will exist, because then this will converge to this will become a symmetric matrix. So the inverse will exist there. And for general sum games, there are certain cases where the inverse might not exist. Then you can opt for maybe pseudo inverse or something like that. Yeah, and correct. So since we obtained this sort of a deterministic rule, so what we can do is we can convert this into an update rule. Update rule basically means you're continuously updating, as you do in machine learning, you're continuously updating the parameters. And this is how we get the actual algorithm where you have updates. So in normal gradient descent, you have xk plus 1 equal to xk minus eta into gradient. But here, instead of that gradient, you have this matrix inverse times this vector. And similarly, you have it for y. The good thing about this is that you do not actually need to calculate this inverse. You don't even need to actually calculate these Hessians also. So basically, here we use a trick which is something called, so basically if you have a matrix M and a vector V, so you need not, for calculating the product of them, you need not actually compute the matrix. So basically, suppose you have something like this y, correct, this, and you have to multiply that with a vector, right? Suppose you want to evaluate this, and this is exactly that we need to evaluate here, right? So we have this mixed Hessian multiplied by a vector. So this is a mixed Hessian multiplied by a vector. So so one simple way is to compute this matrix and then multiply it. One other trick is to just do something like this. So basically what you do is you compute this vector, then you compute the dot product of this with V. So basically this is the dot product between the two vectors, and dot product between two vectors is scalar. So that is why you get a scalar, and then you compute the gradient of a scalar. So basically you're not at all computing the full matrix, you're just computing the gradient 2 times, and you're performing a multiplication of the operation. So this is something called Perlmutter trick. If I'm able to recall, I'm not sure, but it's something called Perlmutter trick, and this is very commonly used in optimization and machine learning to compute Hessian vector products without actually computing the Hessian. So you can get easily this term, and again here you have an inverse term and a vector, so you need not actually calculate the inverse. There is something called a conjugate gradient algorithm in which you can compute inverse vector products without actually computing the full inverse. So this algorithm is computationally still efficient. And Manav, as you were telling that why we are not going for quadratic approximation. So one simple explanation is that quadratic approximation will introduce those pure Hessian terms, and it will be very computationally difficult. It will have a lot of regularization updates also. It will put a lot of constraints, and it will be very computationally difficult to perform updates. We don't want to use simultaneous gradient descent, but at the same time we also want to maintain computational efficiency, right? So sort of rather than going to directly to quadratic approximation, the middle ground is to go to a bilinear approximation. And in like this bilinear approximation is also it has also like it also has a game theoretic motivation, which like I'll just explain right now. So this is the main algorithm. Basically, this is the main algorithm, and this algorithm is the natural generalization of gradient descent to multiplayer games. This is what they mention in the paper. And the basically the magical terms in this update rule or in this algorithm are these Hessian terms. They are the ones that bring every sort of the interaction between the players, because these are the lowest order terms that can incorporate interaction between players. So basically, like the trade-off between modeling interaction and the computational efficiency. If there is a lot of interaction, it will be you can model, like you can have quadratic approximations also, but that will be very expensive computationally. What this does is that this sort of like finds a middle ground which does both of them. Right. So in single agent you had simple gradient descent, and in multi-agent case you have competitive gradient descent, as in this paper, which is the optimal solution of the Nash equilibrium of regularized bilinear approximation of the underlying game, right? And using bilinear instead of linear preserves the interactive nature of the problem, it sort of improves the stability also. So like if you're interested in the paper, they also give a theoretical proof of local convergence of this algorithm. So right now I didn't give any proof of convergence, right? That this algorithm converges to this point. I did not give any proof, but in the paper they give a proof of local convergence of this algorithm in case of locally convex concave zero sum games. And they have some experiments also, and there are a bunch of other properties associated with this algorithm. Like this does not have much effect when you increase the step size. So in many times in optimization you have to sort of decrease the step size, right? But here you can like increase the step size and you can converge faster. So this is and again here, yeah. So one interesting thing to see here is that if you make the mixed Hessian term 0, so suppose you make this Hessian term 0 and this also 0, so this just reduces to identity. Inverse of identity is identity only, and then again this reduces to 0, and then you just get eta into gradient of f, which is nothing but simple gradient descent, right? So what this intuitively tells is that when mixed Hessians are 0, there is no interaction between the agents. That is why SimGD was failing. And this tells us that SimGD was a special case of CGD where both the agents update their parameters irrespective of the learning of the other agent, which is, yeah, like which is a highly unlikely assumption in multi-agent systems. Right. So does anyone have any doubt?
I had one.
Yeah.
How are you saying that the bilinear case now is mapping the learnings of the other agents efficiently? What's the intuitive understanding for that?
Yeah. So I have it here. I have written a game theoretic interpretation of CGD. So exactly your doubt will be answered here only.
Okay, fine. I had one more. You stated that the variance should be made to go to 0, but the variance itself depended on the expectation of x. If you see the derivation of variance of x the way you stated.
No, variance is not like made to go to 0. You're assuming that for minimization, like I'm not saying that while experimenting you like do something that variance reduces to 0. What you do is basically you keep the expectation same. It's not that okay. So even if suppose you take a Gaussian curve and you can keep the mean same and still reduce the variance, right? It does not matter. So this equation gives a relation between the expectation and the variance, but this does not mean that if you keep these expectations same, you cannot reduce the variance. So if you take a Gaussian and if you keep the mean 0, you can still have a curve with a variance of 5, and you can still like sort of squeeze that curve to gain the variance something like 1. So the broadness of the curve will be different, right?
Yeah, good for that.
Yeah, so expectation is still the same, but the variance is changing. So Yeah. So as Manav said, so like, why am I saying that this, why does this model the other player? This is something where, like, there is some sort of game theory involved here, and the title here is an interesting one, which I'll just tell what this title means. So basically, what I did here is, like, instead of writing like this, I wrote it like a compact form, which is like this, which is in form of a block matrix. A block matrix is a matrix of matrix, right? And this is a something which I like just took from Wikipedia. You can there's a proof of that. I'm not going into that. But if you take this as A, this as B, this as C, this as D, then and if you solve this, solving this would exactly give you this. It would exactly give you this, and in fact, had I had proved here also that it will give this. It's nothing, just some simple algebra. You substitute this as A, this as B, this as C, this as D, and you'll get exactly that. So this is a big block matrix where this itself is a matrix, then this again is a matrix, this again is a matrix, and this again is a matrix. And this is the inverse of that. And here are so this is a stack of 2 vectors. This is again a stack of 2 vectors. And writing this, basically, like, it makes the representation more compact. And then what you can do is, you can write this as I minus A. So this is some, here I'm applying some tricks, basically writing this as I minus A, where A is this. So if you take I will be, so in this case, I will be something like I 0 0. So this is a block identity matrix where you have 1 all over here and 0 everywhere else. So you take that identity, you do minus some matrix, and that matrix is given by this. So I hope this is clear to everyone that in matrix A it will be 0 here on this diagonal, and negative of this term here. And why I wrote this as I minus A inverse is because using Newman series, if the learning rate is small enough, you can approximate the inverse. So this is an approximation where you have limit n tends to infinity, a power k summation, and you can approximate the inverse as I plus inverse of I minus A as I plus A squared, and so on. So this is sort of an approximation that you can use. And so suppose you took the approximation to be I. So suppose you neglected these terms. So because it's an approximation, so you can take it up to any n, right? So here n equal to 0. You plug in n equal to 0, and this becomes, so I minus A inverse just becomes I. And if you plug in I here, so this whole becomes I, and then you get just gradient descent back. So this is the first partial sum. So this is the first partial sum. This is the second partial sum. This is the third partial sum. So since I took here I, so this is the first partial sum, and this is corresponding to a strategy where agent 1 thinks that the agent 2 remains constant, and similarly for agent 2 also thinks that agent 1 remains constant. So this in game theory is something called first order reasoning, and this is a pictorial representation. So this is agent 1 and this is agent 2, and agent 1 is thinking that the other agent is static. So it is not at all thinking at all. So the delta theta 2 of the other agent, delta theta 2 is the change in the parameters of the other agent. So that is 0. And that is exactly what simultaneous gradient descent does. And yeah, and that is why it does not perform well, because here you are assuming that the other agent is static, right? And then one level advanced, so one level advanced strategy of that would be to assume the approximation to be I plus A. So as you increase this power, your approximation becomes better and better, right? So instead of approximating it as I, you approximate it as I plus A, correct? So instead of when you plug I plus A instead of I minus A inverse, then you get something like this. And this is the second order recursion reasoning, which is already proposed in literature. Like this happened, this came out before CGD, which is something called LOLA, learning with opponent learning awareness, where basically agent 1 thinks that agent 2 is a naive learner. Basically, it means that agent 1 thinks that agent 2 thinks that agent 1 is constant. So this sort of like a this is where it becomes a bit complicated. that previously it was that agent 1 thinks that agent 2 is constant, but right now it is one level deeper, where agent 1 thinks that agent 2 thinks that agent 1 is constant. And similarly, agent 2 thinks that agent 1 thinks that agent 2 is constant. So this is where you do not assume the other agent to be static. You assume it to be learning by a simple gradient descent. So this is something called a second order recursion reasoning, and also known as Lola in the literature. And similarly, you can go on and on. So here you can take approximation up to a square, then approximation up to a cube, and you can go on, and then you will form some sort of like a thought loop where so this is like the level n recursion. So you're going till n level deep, right? You're thinking that agent 1 is, so you're thinking that the other agent is thinking that you're thinking that the other agent is thinking that, and this thought process goes on. And when you go till infinity, so when you and note that when you go each level deeper, you are actually like getting a better strategy, right? So like a simple strategy is where n is equal to 0, where the assumption is very, very naive. Then one level higher strategy is to assume that the other agent is naive itself, but that might or might not be the case. The other agent might also be assessing what you are doing, so that is why it might also not be naive. So when you like asymptotically, when you go to infinity, then basically when this power goes to infinity, you get this inverse, and then we basically, from where we started, we come back there. So basically what I was trying to show by this is that this CGD, it recovers the infinite order recursion basically. So so like this Lola, it does not recover it recovers the second order recursion, where agent 1 thinks that agent 2 thinks that agent 1 is constant, and so on and on. But CGD, it recovers the full infinite order recursion till the Nash equilibrium is delivered in the limit. So that is why it is learning with the full awareness of what the other agent is doing. That is why that is why it is different from the normal SimGD. And this is actually one of the motivations why we choose bilinear, because if we choose bilinear, then we get this sort of nice this sort of nice game theoretic interpretation. If we take that quadratic, then we won't get it. We will get something more complex. And all the previous algorithms that I talked about, SimGD, Lola, etc., are actually special cases of CGD. So although this work, CGD came later, but it proved that all the previous ones were the special cases of that approximation, where the approximation was kept up to some finite n, but here the approximation is up to infinity in the limit, and hence like this is a unified framework for multi-agent optimization, because like this incorporates the full awareness of how the opponent is learning. Right. So this is sort of like a game theoretic interpretation, but still it has a lot of maths in it. So there's one last thing. After that I'll mostly wrap up. Is there any doubt here in this Newman series and inverses and all? Right. So okay, I'll quickly give you the last intuition. So this and all was like involving a lot of maths, and it might be difficult a bit to actually conclude that this is like, what do you mean by first order reasoning, what do you mean by zeroth order reasoning, or what do you mean by second order reasoning. It might be a bit difficult. So here is actually an intuition. So this is a very popular game in game theory. This is also in literature called something like something called Keynesian beauty contest. I think you Google that, you'll get it. So this is a modified version of that. The game is called Guess the 2x3. This is a link to that game. So the game is that there are n players, and each of the players need to pick a real number between 0 and 100. And the player whose guess is closest to the 2/3 of the average of all the guesses is declared as the winner. Right. So this is very, very simple game. And the theory, like, so in theory, we'll assume that all the agents are rational. In practice, it might not be the case, but in theory, we assume that all the agents are rational, right? So there can be a bunch of strategies here. So let us analyze one by one. So as I said here, the first order recursion reasoning, right? So what do you mean by first order recursion reasoning is that the level 1 strategy would be that each of the players just randomly picks up any number. Say you pick your favorite number. Suppose your favorite number is 54, you pick that, and that would essentially correspond to the first order recursion or the level 1 strategy. And what this essentially means is that by following this strategy, a player assumes that all the other n-1 players are not at all thinking, because you just on the basis of your thinking, just on your some favorite number, you just chose a number. So there is no reasoning involved, right? So this is exactly what your naive learning or your SimGD, your simple gradient descent does. It does not think at all, and it randomly picks any number, right? So this is level 1 strategy. This is one possible strategy, but as you can see that this is very naive and this is not very good. Then the second level strategy, which I told here to be right, this where you approximate it with I plus a. The second level strategy would be to think that all the other n-1 players are naive learners. So basically, you do not think that the other players are a constant. You think that the other players are also thinking, but they're thinking with one level shallow strategy. So you're thinking with level 2, the other players are thinking with level 1, right? So if you're assuming that the other players are thinking with level 1, so that means that you're assuming that all the other players are picking a random number between 0 and 100, right? So suppose your favorite number, right? So then the optimal strategy would be for you to pick the number would be to pick a number close to 33. Why I'm saying 33 is because as the number of players tend to infinity, by the law of large numbers, the average of all those will converge to 50, and 2 by 3rd of 50 is 33. And if you will choose 33, that will be optimal for you. So 33 is something which is a better guess if you are assuming that if you are following level 2 strategy, and all the other and you're assuming that the other players are reasoning using level 1 strategy, and that is exactly the second order reasoning or Lola, whatever you want to call it. And then the one level deeper strategy would be level 3 strategy, where you assume that all the other n-1 players are level 2 thinkers. So basically, you think that all the other players will pick 33 because they are level 2 thinkers. So that is why you pick 2 by 3rds of 33, which is 22. So the level a player playing with level 3 strategy would pick 22 as the answer, and this goes on and on and on. And the level infinity strategy or infinite order recursion would generalize everything. And in terms of this game, in machine learning terms, it will be equivalent to CGD. In game theoretic terms, it will be equivalent to each of the players picking their number to be exactly 0, because this is because you see here initially the optimal guess was 33, then it was 22, then it will become 15, and it will decrease and decrease, go on decreasing, and when it converges to 0, that will be the infinite order recursion. And when all the n players pick their guess to be exactly 0, then that is what is the Nash equilibrium, because in that case the average of 0 is 0. Like if you have n zeros, the average is 0, and so is the 2 by 3rd of it. So no player will have any incentive to deviate from its strategy of picking 0, right? So this gives an intuition that when you apply this infinite order recursion, if you think like that, then on the whole, on the group, you converge to Nash equilibrium. And this is exactly what CGD is doing. All the other algorithms are like the first, second, or third partial sums. But CGD is it goes on till infinity, till the infinity in the limit, until the Nash equilibrium is delivered. And this is obviously assuming that all the other players are rational, and the Nash equilibrium 0 will not be achieved if you have level 3 strategy or 2 strategy or 4 strategy. In this particular game, even if you have an infinite level deep strategy where all the players pick their guess to be 0, in that case, your system will be in Nash, right? And this need not be in every case. There might be games where level going till say level 4 is sufficient, or going till level 5 is sufficient, or even there might be game where simple gradient descent also works. But that's not always the case. So this is an example, sort of like a real life real example where I sort of tell that why this CGD converges to Nash equilibrium, or why does it converge to beta points in the space. Right. So there are these some other things which I'll skip now because I think there's almost time. And yeah, this is a general optimization procedure, and you can bring multi-agent RL here. You can, because yeah, you if you have these like gradient estimates and Hessian vector product estimates and inverse vector product estimates, you can easily plug in and have multi-agent algorithms. And there are some reasons, as Manav asked, why bilinear makes sense, why not going to a quadratic approximation. So they have actually discussed very deeply in the paper why bilinear actually makes sense. There is something related to invariances, change in coordinates, which is very like going deep into the maths. I have not included it here, but you can check the paper. The paper link is the paper is here. You can see it, competitive gradient descent, and this has a lot of applications. Like right now, I did not discuss any application. It was just pure theory or like pure optimization stuff. But there have been various works which have shown that this can be used in constraint optimization, robust optimization, training of GANs. So this paper, implicit competitive regularization in GANs, you can see where it is used for training, giving implicit regularization in GANs, inverse RL, multi-agent RL, imitation learning, computer graphics, and this is in the end one sort of illustration that I showed you the bilinear picture, right? So the orange one here is the normal gradient descent, and the blue one here you see that if you use this optimization procedure, it converges to 0, 0, and this is empirically shown in the bilinear game. I did not include any other experiments from any other paper because you had only, like I showed you only bilinear game, and this again you can see that here it is diverging and here it converged in approximately 250 iterations only. So and this converts to 0, 0. So these are sort of results, and these you can extend to natural gradients where you have KL divergence penalty and stuff. So there is a paper called competitive mirror descent. If you want to look into it, that you can look into, where you have this sort of natural gradient descent update rules, where you like take into account the Riemannian geometry, basically the trust regions. You take into account that, and and there is a lot of scope for future work. So as Manav said, that scaling to any number of agents, multilinear approximation. So that is something on which currently my research is going on, and there are more things like opponent modeling. So right now, what we assumed is that each agent knows what the other agent's parameters are would be, right? Because so in this update rule, you had the access to Y, right? So but in actual multi-agent setting in the beginning, as I said, when you have decentralized setting, you won't have access to other agent parameters, right? So you have to model the opponent. So some techniques for that, for partially observable domains, imperfect information games. So there is a lot of scope for future work, and yeah, thank you. So if you guys have any question, then you can ask me. I'll be here for a while, or later you can, like, maybe if you want, you can email me or you can ping me on WhatsApp. This I think had gone a bit long. I apologize for that, but yeah, like I wanted to fully explain this procedure, so I hope you liked it. Yeah, thanks for attending. So Arpita, I think we can stop recording.